Harry Potter theories, the fuel that keeps Potterheads alive. So here's one for you. What if the Dursleys were actually lovely people before Harry met them? And what if Harry imagined the wizarding world? Let's dive into the unlikeliest first. Harry wakes up one day, and the wizarding world was just a dream. This theory's really sad because it assumes that everything we've seen was just Harry's imagination. His mind created a wonderful place where he's admired, respected, and above all, loved. He had a mother figure in Mrs. Weasley and tons of friends at school. He had a mentor in the shape of Dumbledore, Sirius, and Lupin, who also represented his father figures. And of course, the villain, Lord Voldemort, the culmination of everything horrible in Harry's life. Now, the whole "it was just a dream" is one of the oldest tricks in the book. It rarely works, honestly, just feels lazy. Even though this theory could work if you actually put some thought into it, in reality, it cheapens Harry's story. Theories need to make you go, aha, that explains it. That's why a well-thought-out theory is so tough to come by, but not as tough as you'd think. For example, how did Bill, Percy, and Barty Crouch Jr. get 12 owls each? Well, the answer there is simple. Time turners. Mind blown. Am I right? This one's relatively new, and I like this one a lot more than the dream theory. Bill, Percy, and Barty using time turners for their owls actually makes sense. Think about it. Fifth year is notoriously difficult for Hogwarts students. People break down all the time. Even Hermione, the most ambitious witch of her age, nearly goes insane trying to attempt 11 owls. So the three young boys definitely used ministry-approved time turners to attend all their owls. It just makes sense, you know? It's not impossible, but you want to know which theory sounds impossible until you really think about it? The fact that the Dursleys may not have hated Harry. Yup, as far-fetched as it sounds, this one's actually plausible. Here are the facts. Harry is a Horcrux in human form, and Horcruxes, when in close proximity, can turn people into the worst versions of themselves. It doesn't happen immediately, since it takes some time for the magic to take effect. We've seen it with both Ron and Harry in Deathly Hallows, and they just wore the locket for a few days. Imagine living with a Horcrux for 11 whole years. Imagine what it would do to muggles, who can't even protect themselves against basic magic, let alone powerful dark magic. So living with Harry possibly brought out the worst possible version of all three Dursleys, making them vicious, cruel, and superficial. But what if Harry wasn't a Horcrux? Could Aunt Petunia actually have loved him and cared for him? I don't know. It's a big maybe, because the Dursleys don't sound like great people to begin with. Either way, nothing justifies the abuse he suffered at their hands. But they were his only blood relatives, so he had no choice. Or did he? What if there was a certain someone in 12 Grimmauld Place who was also related to him? So the theory that Harry and Sirius aren't related isn't new either. Fans connected the dots the moment the Order of the Phoenix movie showed us Sirius's family tree. So a quick recap. Harry goes to 12 Grimmauld Place for the first time and spends some quality time with his godfather. They head into the room with the family tree tapestry on the wall, and if you squint your eyes real hard, you can spot two family members named Doria Black and Charles Potter. The couple married and had an unnamed son. We don't know who the son is, but we do know that this points to James and Sirius being blood relatives, which means Harry and Sirius are related too. Also, Sirius says pure blood families inbreed a lot, so the Potters and Blacks were meant to intersect sometime, right? It's a bummer that Harry didn't live with his godfather as a kid. Imagine how much happier and more outgoing he would have been if he and Sirius lived together. Unfortunately though, Dumbledore would have known this, and if Sirius wasn't wrongly accused of murder, he would have put Harry in Sirius's care. But it's okay. It's not like Harry had a lack of parental figures in his life, right? Mr. and Mrs. Weasley were there, sure, but I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about Ron and Hermione being a parallel for Harry's parents. This theory comes from Redditor Collect and Run, and I love it. So, you know how Harry had a difficult childhood, and that his childhood could have turned him into a terrible human as an adult? But he didn't. Ron and Hermione kept him out of harm's way, and acted like his guardian angels. But what if they were more than that? Ron's a wisecracking, pure-blood wizard like James, and Hermione's a smart and empathetic half-blood witch like Lily. Ron teaches Harry about the wizarding world, like a dad would, and Hermione acts as Harry's conscience, calling him out when he's gone too far. It's one of the more probable theories that I've read in a long time. But imagine if everything went right, but Harry still turned into the worst version of himself. Imagine if Dumbledore knew the consequences of suppressed magic and still put him in the Dursleys' care. Imagine if 11 years of suppressing his magical powers turned Harry into an Obscurus. An Obscurus is a terrible affliction, much like a parasite that just won't let go. We've seen that with Credence in Fantastic Beasts, and just how bad it can get. So, according to Synchrodon on Reddit, Dumbledore knew the Dursleys wouldn't tolerate Harry's magical powers, and would likely abuse him and suppress his abilities, which in turn would turn him into an Obscurus. Maybe that was all part of the plan to take Voldemort down. Maybe Dumbledore intended to use the power of an Obscurus to finally get rid of him. But when that didn't happen, he had to resort to Plan B. Find and kill the Horcruxes. But maybe he left Harry with the Dursleys because of the whole Petunia's his last remaining blood relative thing. Cause old Dumbledude wouldn't be cruel enough to do something bad to the boy, right? Well, what if I tell you that old Dumbledude wanted Harry to fail at occlumency? Yeah, according to Redditor Oni Knight, the old warlock wanted Harry to open his mind further. He knew that Snape and Harry in a single room was a ticking time bomb. So hoping they'd somehow put aside their differences for a session of occlumency is insane, even by Dumbledore standards. But Oni Knight explained that this was all part of the plan. Harry would fail to learn how to close one's mind to external attacks, and then his mind would become more malleable, and Voldemort, being short-tempered and erratic, would make a mistake, like showing up at the Ministry and revealing to the world that he's alive. That's what Dumbledore wanted all along. Honestly, the man saw things in the future even Trelawney didn't. Which reminds me of a funny thing I read about Harry and Ron. Apparently, the two of them are better than Trelawney at divination. Hear me out. They had zero interest in divination in their third year. They mostly BS'd their way through the classes, and a lot of it had to do with their distrust of Trelawney. They just assumed she's a fraud and never paid attention in class. But imagine if they'd learned from a qualified teacher like Lupin. They would have discovered that they're pretty good at this stuff. For example, Ron predicts that Harry's going to suffer but be happy about it, which came true, don't you think? Harry suffered a lot in the books and movies, but ultimately he's happy that Voldemort's dead and that he's married to Ginny. And during the divination exam, Harry predicts that Buckbeak will fly away, and he does, with Sirius riding him. So yeah, if you ask me, those two have a penchant for fortune telling. And that's all I have for you today. See you in the next video.